Well, I will go ahead and formally introduce you. Everybody, I'm so excited to have DJ Mr. Leonard here to join us to talk about American music culture. And so I think it's very important. I mean, now is what I was talking about. In days like today, in times like now, the last several months, history books will only tell so much. But really, you're going to see it in the arts and in the music that are really going to tell the story of what we've lived through during this time. And I had to get the best to talk about it. Because this isn't the first time that music has been telling our history, and especially in America. I mean, this is going to be something that's continued on, and I think it's honestly one of the best ways to give our future generations a history lesson in a way that they will remember.
Yeah, definitely. I guess I can pick right up right there because you made a very valid point. And as we sit here having this conversation, we as American citizens come from the greatest musical history on the planet, bar none. Why? Because the history that took place here in this country amongst people of color, African Americans, however you want to be politically correct, if you will, it didn't happen anywhere else in the world. And for those of us who know that, you know, that's cool, but there's a lot of us who take it for granted. I was once guilty of that. And a lot of us don't know that. And that's very important because our music and culture is celebrated all over the world in every other country except for the country that produced it. And I'm sure you're like, well, wait a minute, what's up with that? And, you know, there are many reasons as we are dealing with these turbulent and trying times as we speak, historically, right? So with that said, it is very important for us as a people culturally to celebrate our history and educate our youth so they will know just that. I tell people all the time, you know, when you put things in perspective, everything is under attack today, from the organic apple that you get in the store to the music that you download, listen to, you know, or purchase. Nothing's off the table. And as important as art, music, and culture is, that's the very first thing that usually gets cut in any program that is meant to be very educational or information for all of us. So, yeah. So, keep that in mind.
That is definitely one thing I like to strongly push. So even though I have a very strong athletic background, so I mean I did sports all my life. However, I also did dance, and I also played in band. I played in jazz band for a few years in high school because I think there's some valuable lessons, and also I think there's a special way of teaching when it comes to music. Not only is it just the history lesson behind it, but it's also when it comes to picking up a beat and when it comes to staying in rhythm. Like some of the things that you learn in there will help you with memorization, will help you with actually learning a lot of other different subjects. It's kind of weird how it can transition into other topics that you wouldn't really even think of. And so, yes, I mean, I remember when funding was getting cut during my time in high school and middle school. And it's hard to see because, I mean, for a lot of youth, that is an outlet for them. And when you cut that, it's kind of like, where do they go from there?
Yeah, no, definitely. You know, I have had the pleasure, you know, outside of DJing live in the community, being on local radio for some years, talking and doing to many, students at various universities and colleges right here in the Central Valley. And I would ask them various questions like, do you think that music has a place in everyday business? Is music a form of therapy? Should there be a law against dancing? Do you believe that music is one of the most important educational tools? As we speak of education or learning, and you'd be surprised at some of the answers, but overall, most people, would agree to most of those things, but there are those who don't believe in a lot of those things. And then, you have to ask yourself the question, why and what is happening with the behavioral patterns of, our society when these things fall short in our community, when we know how important and valuable they are. So these are the things I've been dealing with for some years. But I got my start here in Fresno in '97. I moved here from Ohio. Big shout out to Ohio State, the Buckeyes. Also, Ohio is the home of funk. Lakeside, Zapp, Roger Troutman, the OJs, the Ohio Players, just to name a few. I grew up at a time in the 70s, to show you how young that I am, and a musical family, and at my grandma's house where music was always prevalent. My uncle, who was the youngest of 7, he was a drummer, musician, guitar, bass player, and he was pretty much instrumental in educating me at a young age about music and getting me excited about music. And so he even had a band in my grandmother's basement. My grandmother used to let them practice in the basement because she felt, hey, at least I can keep an eye on these guys and know that they're safe, And of course, anytime I would hear any music going down, I would break my neck to get downstairs. Of course, I've got my share of discipline and whoopings. But, I'm sure my mom and grandma realized very soon that, okay, music is just a part of this boy's existence. We can't keep him from getting downstairs. I started playing drums when I was like 4. And I remember because I could barely reach the hi-hat with my foot and the bass drum with my other foot. So I would just, improvise using cymbals and things. But,
you need that extender.
Yeah. But nevertheless, I figured out I was playing and I got my musical lessons, tried to stay with it, but, in time, came a teenager and, I got sidetracked by beautiful young women and sports and, the typical. But long story short, I never forget when my uncle would come home, he would always have that brown paper bag which had albums in it. And I would see that bag and I knew, like, oh boy, here we go. I cannot wait to see what he's got in that bag. I would almost knock him down before he could even get in the door good. And I'll never forget, he would say, okay, we're going to listen to, a couple of these new records I got. And he would put the record on, and before he would even drop the needle on the first song, he would say, okay, Leonard, we're just going to follow the drummer this time when we play the song. And I would just be so excited. I'm like, okay, all right, cool. And then we would just zone in on listening to the drummer. And then he would lift the needle up and he would put it down. He said, this time we're just going to follow the bass player. And I'd be like, okay. And then he would continue on through the rhythm section to, you know, whether it was horns or guitar or keyboard or vocals. And then he would finally lift the needle and say, this time we're going to listen to it in its entirety. Well, I didn't understand at that time, but he was teaching me how to listen to music. And yes, for those watching and listening, there's a way to listen to music. Also, it helps you identify rhythm, harmony, and melody, which is missing a lot overall in music today in this beat generation that we're living in now. And, you know, I never took any of that for granted. And that is what has helped me and helped my ear to become as sharp as it is. And so I always try to share that with people because listening is a gift. It's a talent also. So when people say, oh, you know, my brother and my sister, you know, they're artists or, you know, they can play, you know, instruments, but that was never me. Well, I bet you have a good ear. I bet you know good music when you hear it. And I'll never forget, I'll share another quick story. I was at a good friend of mine's home, and she had a husband and wife couple over who was close to her, and we were on the subject of music. And her husband was real quiet, and she's the talker. And so she interjected and made a statement like, you know, yeah, my brother, he's a good musician, or my sister, she's pretty, you know, creative, and blah, blah, blah. And out of nowhere, her husband goes, listen, you're the only person I know that can hear a song on a radio one time and know every lyric and sing it word for word. And she's like, what? You know, he's like, yeah. And then he was quiet from that point on. And I was like, yeah, you have a gift. You have a talent. You know, people can't just do that. So, you know, I thought that was just hilarious that he was completely mute until he heard her, and then he just interjected and called her out. Because, yeah, because, you know, you witness these things, you know, that are very special things not to be taken for granted. So, yeah. You know?
See, I think you make a really good point about being able to listen to music, and when it comes to separating all of the pieces, I mean, the few times now that we get a chance to listen to live music, and I'm speaking of like live from an instrument.
Yeah, right.
That is something like I still truly enjoy because of just like my musical background and being able to, especially for me, it's jazz and blues. Like I absolutely love that. And it's being able to take apart each instrument and just being able to focus in on them. And especially when they have their own solos, like, I mean, that's just the best part. But you're always listening to, at the same time, when like maybe there's a trumpet going, but you're listening to what's the piano, how are they reacting? How are the drums kind of beating along to it? When are they going to switch it up? Maybe they're going to do a tempo change. And I think like nowadays, you're right, you don't get that same type of, I think I would call it like focused in music creation. And so like I will, if I'm looking to do that, I will stay stuck on older music just because that is where I can find it. And it's kind of lost. I would hope that there are artists nowadays that are current that do still have that special ear, I think, that want to share that with the world. But I think they're also shorted by the streaming services too. Like you're not going to be able to hear everything off of certain services because the quality just isn't there. But if you happen to purchase their music, get a vinyl, be able to listen to it and not live, but in a different form that is not streaming, you can hear for like how they intended you to hear it.
Well, first of all, kudos to you, and I would assume your parents for playing all that wonderful, good music around you. And how fitting, Jasmine, that your name is like the greatest American classical art form that ever existed on this planet. Yeah, jazz. Jazz means spirit and energy, vibrancy, just like Jasmine that I'm talking to right now. Also, since, you know, we know jazz evolving from New Orleans, well, how the name even came about, the French brought to New Orleans the perfume industry. And the most popular oil was jasmine. Some people even spell jazz J-A-S before it derived into J-A-Z-Z. Nevertheless, jazz is what we call American classical music. But if you bring that term up to most people, they will say, no, America does not have a classical art form musically. But we do, because most people think of classical music as European classical music.
Yes.
Mozart, Beethoven, Tchaikovsky, you know. So that's European classical music, but American classical music is Duke Ellington, Billy Strayhorn, Dizzy Gillespie, Charlie Bird Parker, Coltrane, Miles, Monk. You see what I'm saying? So, you know, I always try to let people know that I come from the school of jazz and funk, coming from Ohio. And in the 70s, the term fusion or jazz fusion was at the forefront at that time. Anyway, you know, as we now are in this hip-hop generation, when I speak to students, I always try to give the correlation between jazz, the jazz era, and the hip-hop era, because there are a lot of correlations simply because the style of jazz called bebop, which sounds similar to hip-hop. How ironic, huh? That bebop generation gave birth to those babies that would become what we know today as the hip-hop generation. So to be a jazz artist back in the day, they're having a conversation musically on stage. Also, we call that improvising.
Yes.
Okay? So some music is written, but most of it is not. You know, you're trying to going on the fly, and you're creating as an artist, and you're having a musical conversation, which is probably one of the most beautiful conversations, right, that you can have. But then when you see a jazz artist take a solo, that's what you would call in hip hop when you see an MC freestyling. So freestyling, you know, as an MC versus soloing on your horn as a jazz artist, or what we call improvising. You are playing, for example, Charlie Bird Parker, who listened to all music as most jazz artists did. They studied all music. He was a fan not only of just jazz, but country music, classical, and we could go on and on. Sometimes in his soloing, he would play scores of classical music from some of his favorite classical artists in his soloing. Now, I can barely walk and chew gum at the same time. So here you have artists who are playing a style of music. On top of that, they're now improvising and mixing in other elements of other styles of music, still playing the music with the quintet. And you're like, how does your brain even be able to do all of that, let alone remember? But this is what you call being a master. When you master your instrument, you hone in on your craft and become a master, then that means you can play all styles, all genres at an elite level. And so to be able to play jazz music, that is the elite form of musicianship. Classical music now, sheet music is in front of you. You're playing the music as you see it, okay? Which is beautiful. I'm a major fan of classical music, obviously, as well. And, but anyhow, that's the difference. Here you have sheet music in front of you where you can follow, read, play. But then when you get in a jazz setting, these guys have all of that stuff just
in their head, ready to go.
You know, and so, you know, you're just like, wow, like, what else can you say? And, you know, as a DJ, I'll just say this for the record. There's no substitute for live music or to be in the moment. And back in the day, some top bands toured with producers and DJs because it was very, appropriate and fitting to have a DJ set a tone or vibration for an audience so that when the live music or the band came out on the stage, they could get right into whatever they were doing musically and the audience be immediately ready for them. So you see, it was like a 1-2 punch.
Yes.
We're losing a lot of these things today. That's why some bands that may be a little more experimental, you know, or on the cutting edge, you know, certain audiences might be like, oh, you know, like we can't follow them or we're not ready for that, you know. So you need those things. You need those things because that helps you follow where the artist is going, what the vibration is going to be, to open you up so you can receive, you know, the music. But, you know, today as we discuss these things, as you know, and I spoke of this earlier about art and music seem to be the first thing that are cut throughout our, you know, educational system and things of that nature. And yes, for the record, we understand that music is probably one of the most important and powerful teaching tools that you can have. So how and why would a school system or educational institution not use music and musical vibrations to teach? And then you wonder why kids are not interested in going to school. You know, it's like, come on now. And then you wonder why kids are, or people are just ignorant to their own music history. Mm-hmm. You know, one of the most difficult things for me as I, you know, am seeing the social media generation come about as we speak of live music was to be in front of a live jazz quintet or quartet or just, you know, band of that nature. And you already know it's one thing where people are in front of them with their phones, but it's another thing when they're so ignorant to the history that when a jazz musician solos and finishes his solo, they don't have enough appreciation, let alone knowledge, to clap and show that call and response.
Yes.
To support that artist who has been putting in a lot of work just to appear in front of you for that moment and present his creativity or her creativity. And that is just a natural response that you should do. You know, you want to let them know that we're here with you, we're in the moment, we're enjoying, we're listening, and we're appreciative of you blessing us with your musical vibrations and creativity.
Yes.
It's not something to be taken for granted at all.
No, and I think you make an excellent point about being in the moment, which I feel like we've lost sight of, for sure. And I mean, I'm guilty of it. I catch myself as well. But when you are in the moment, those are the memories that you do happen to like keep with you. I mean, I have plenty of those times where it's just like, set aside your phone, enjoy what you're listening to, enjoy the company that you're surrounded with. I mean, myself, along with several friends, have the pleasure of finally being able to hear and see you in person on Friday for Fred's Brew, and didn't lift my phone at all. It was just listening, and I was like, I'm just enjoying this. I'm having conversations with friends. Every time you catch a good song, and you're like, never mind, let's halt what we're just talking about because I'm going to listen to this. And so...
Well, thank you. I really appreciate that, and we all needed that. Yeah. So thank you very much.
Of course.
So good to hear that. Yeah. It was a good night. Didn't know what to expect, but once again, I always tell people when things become very challenging in our society, there's no other time but that time to have music come to the forefront.
Yes.
In our history, there has never been a war that has taken place in the history of this country where music wasn't called upon to heal and bring hope to a people who were losing that. And it's documented. Our military has always had a military band, whether it be jazz or what have you. So if the military understands how important it is to have music, then why is our society falling short on bringing that to the forefront, let alone our educational system? And so for those who are watching, who are in a position to bring these things to our society, to our communities, to our youth, kudos to you, and please continue to fight back. And that's what we have to do. We have to continue to rally together and unite and fight for these very things that literally heal our community, heal the human condition, and bring that positivity and hope to our society. Because that's the power of music, literally. I always tell people, when you think of MOTOWN and what we call the love movement, or when songs were made about love, the baby boom generation, I know you've heard that term. Well, how do you think that came about? Somebody had to ask for someone's hand to dance, and fast forward, somebody was probably born, in a matter of time, because they met, during at the roller skating rink or at a, party or youth center, where music was happening. And, this is what it means when we talk about art plus music plus culture equaling life. That's how powerful music is. I always let people know we've all had musical toys growing up, and we all have heard those notes or seen those notes when we speak of do, re, fa, sol, la. What I'm getting at. Well, those notes represent a vibration within the universe. And there are 7 notes, major notes, or 7 major vibrations. And guess what? We also have 7 chakras within the body. So when you tap into those vibrations, it resonates with the human condition. As I spoke earlier about how music, we are the music. Sometimes I have to even be careful how I talk about music, as if it's something you just set on the shelf. When you want it, you pick it up. When you don't, you set it down. But in retrospect, we are the music. We are, as we speak of the chakra, we're made up of rhythm, harmony, and melody. The way you walk, the way you talk, the way you write. What makes you unique are those very frequencies, sonic vibrations that we're connected with within this universe. Now, to bring it all home, we've had musical icons as we speak of universal vibrations in the realms of music. Well, we've only had certain icons that were sent here to this planet that have been able to represent those special vibrations throughout the universe. One being a guy by the name of Bob Marley. As soon as you hear his name, you think of a genre called reggae, right? It's just how fitting. That is one particular vibration that resonates throughout the entire universe. There were many other reggae artists, but his special spirit, you know, to become an icon, that's what you do. You're bringing a vibration from the universe that reaches everyone from age 8 years old to 80 years old. You know, that changes the whole course and dynamic of, you know, what once was or wasn't. Michael Jackson. No one has sold that many records to, once again, a vast amount of, you know, youth and adults.
Yes.
Just in the name of love. Literally. James Brown. You know, here's another one. And to become an icon, you become bigger than any president, any king, any queen, any diplomat. Yeah, you have that type of power musically. And, you know, it's done out of love. Prince is another one. Like, all these people did, they were sent here, they brought those musical vibrations to us through the name of love. So much so that they even were attacked, you know, on a certain level for it. Or maybe even lost their lives. You can't have that type of power. Not to get too political, but anyway, you get your understanding of why these people are so important, because they're bringing life to us. We can play their music. People ask me sometimes, Leonard, what is one of the best things of being a DJ? And I tell people this all the time. If I could have a camera on my shoulder at all times when I'm DJing to capture the miracles that I'm witnessing in front of me when we talk about humanity, it would just, it'll blow your mind. And it's probably the most exciting thing other than communicating to a people or to humanity through musical vibrations, because when you see a 3-year-old who doesn't know who Michael Jackson is or Bob Marley or Sam Cooke for that matter, but you put that music on and that 3-year-old is just like, hey, whoa, what is going on? See, their spirit knows. They're the most honest beings on the planet, right? That is the greatest experience that you could ever have on this planet. And I could play for kids all day. you know. So anyhow, I can go on and on.
I love that. No, and you're right. I was just having a conversation with my mother and my brother, and we're just talking about, like, if you ever want to see like true reaction, have kids around, because they will be the most honest beings with you, and not just the way that they just verbally like say what they like, what they don't like, but their emotion. They are just so quick to show you what they're feeling. And
Yes.
I could see how that would be very enjoyable to cater towards them all.
Yeah. So you know, picking back up on my personal story here in the Central Valley. Like I said, I got here in '96, and my dad, may he rest in peace, the late Dr. James E. Walton, who was chair of the English department at Fresno State, introduced me to the radio station at Fresno State, which is KFSR, and the speech arts department and so forth. And I had a job at Barnes & Noble at the time, when it was on Blackstone and Shaw. And there was a Fresno State student that worked in the cafe at Barnes & Noble who had a rock music program on the radio. And some of the associates that worked with us told him that, hey, there's a new guy here, Leonard, if you haven't had a chance to talk to him, but he knows music, or he's really into music, and he knows jazz or whatever, and you probably should talk to him, you know. And so then he approached me and asked me would I like to be a guest on his show at KFSR. And at the time, you know, internet wasn't rocking like it is now as far as podcasts and all of this stuff. So it was just FM radio and AM. And I was like, you're on the radio and you're on the FM dial? He's like, yeah, man, yeah. You should come on. You know, I want to know more or be introduced to jazz. Do you have any music you can share with me? And, you know, I was thinking to myself, like, shoot, I don't care if I had just 2 CDs. I'll come on and find a way to stretch it out and introduce you to jazz. So he had me on, and I was on for a couple hours, and he was hysterical. He loved everything that I had shared with him. And then people started calling in throughout, you know, Fresno and the malls and various businesses, like, is this a new program? What's going on? And so Thanksgiving break came up, and he came back to me again. He said, Leonard, this time I'm going to be on for 3 hours. Got enough music where you can come on as my guest and play for 3 hours? And I'm like, sure. Yeah, let's do it. So long story short, the radio station reached out to me after that, and they gave me a 60-day trial period or something to that effect. And I went on, and I wasn't a student. You know, you needed to be a student at the time, but they gave me that 60-day trial period to be on, and I was on. Now, you have to understand, at this time, KFSR, the radio station, was known as the Flaming Chihuahua.
Oh my goodness.
And primarily they played a lot of, you know, heavy metal, rock, hip hop, and there was a really good reggae station on, or a program, you know, on at the time too. But that was it. And here I am playing jazz. And so things were going very well for a while, and then someone complained, right?
It's always one.
And, you know, their beef was he's not a student, and, you know, he shouldn't be on the air, you know. So one of the assistant to one of the deans on the campus was from St. Louis, Missouri, and she loved jazz, and she listened to my program, listened to me, and she caught wind of this. And I didn't know that she was a jazz promoter when she was in St. Louis. Mm-hmm. And she says, if the issue with him having jazz on the radio is that he's not a student, then I will come and use my seniority and sit in with him so the jazz program can continue, because we feel it's important here on the campus.
Yes.
And in the community. And she did just that. And then, of course, in time, eventually, we end up having jazz 7 days a week at KFSR. We even had a Fresno State Billy Higgins Jazz Festival for a while at Fresno State. Mm-hmm. So my goal was simply just to have jazz being played at KFSR. So for all of that to take place, my job, it exceeded my goal. So I couldn't be more happier. And I'm grateful for everyone that I got to meet along that journey within the community. I'm grateful for my dad, who gave me an opportunity to connect, with those on campus and the radio station. And wow, that is how I got connected and became Mr. Leonard, because my jazz program was called Mr. Leonard's Jazz Suite.
Okay. See, yeah. And I was going to ask you that. I was like, you are one of the few people who you don't go by DJ and then your first name. You have Mr. Leonard in there. and like, I love when people do refer to you, they always make sure that they place the Mr. And so you're answering my question right now.
Yeah, so I tell people I'm not DJ Leonard because there's some other DJ Leonards. So I'm DJ Mr. And how I came up with that was, people were like, well, Leonard, what is going to be the name of your jazz program? And at that time, I hadn't thought that deep about it yet. But then I was like, wow, I got to find a name for it. And I had a good friend of mine from Kenya, Africa, and I got to give props to James Kadini, who may watch this, and his gift to me, my Kenyan bracelet here. But we became good friends, and he used to always call me Mr. Leonard, Mr. Leonard. And I used to be like, dude, I'm Leonard. Why you call me Mr. Leonard? He said, well, just, tradition from, coming from Kenya, mm-hmm. We always call the person either Mr. or Miss, just out of respect, and then the person's first name. And I was like, okay, well, that's cool, And so I always appreciated that. And it just stuck. And then I thought, man, I got to come up with a name for my jazz program. Like, what am I going to do? So I just said, well, I'm going to call the show Mr. Leonard's Jazz Suite. And there you have it. And that's how it came about. So,
and it's
so that's how that happened. Yeah. Yeah.
My goodness. And now, and now you have taken on even more, I feel like, at least within the community.
Yeah, well, I've learned so much, not only just from being a professional person, because some people like, Leonard, are you just a full-time DJ? What do you? And I tell people, well, I have a legal copy service. That's my 9 to 5. I've been into that work for, oh man, I don't know, maybe 16 to 17 years now. And, I deal with copying medical records for work comp attorneys. So I deal with people on a professional level as far as doctors, attorneys, etc. And, I've had so many life lessons on what it means to be professional. But as I have become this creative artist, and DJ representing the community, and also my experience of being on radio, I never forget, I thought, geez, what am I going to do with this jazz program of mine, you know, because you can't see your audience. So to address them and then, you know, also share the music. So, you know, quickly I learned about sharing pertinent information in a very professional and communicative way, but also making sure that I share history musically with my audience. That's why I always tell people, if you come to hear DJ Mr. Leonard, school is always in session, because, you know, that's what this is to me. When we talk about art and music and culture, it's an education, right? That's how we learn. That's how you grow. And so I've always tried to do that. I've always tried to bridge that gap. Even on my jazz program, one of the main focuses was playing younger jazz artists of today who you would never hear about normally, as well as sharing some of the master, you know, jazz artists. So we can bridge that gap and people can see the history of, you know, how we got from there to here.
Yes.
And so ever since I've had an opportunity to represent the community at large and DJ out in public, I realize that there's a lot of responsibility that goes along with this. And I always try to make sure that I'm representing myself, the culture, and the history to the utmost level or highest level, because I've received so many blessings from it. And you cannot take that for granted at all. And, you know, you understand what you put out into the universe, that's what comes back to you.
Yes.
So, yeah, I always try to keep it clean and keep it real and authentic with a lot of substance, and make sure that I'm representing everybody, you know, to the fullest. Never want to disrespect anyone's culture, our women, our youth, nor our elders. So, yeah, that's where I'm at.
Well, you always set the standards high. I mean, you elevate on every platform that you've presented on. And so, I mean, bravo for that, because, I mean, from the experiences that I've had and from the ones that I've heard of, and not just, I mean, as I told you over our phone call, it's not just in the music, it's just how you present yourself as a person.
Definitely.
An outstanding job.
Thank you very much. And it means the world to me anytime the younger generation shows me love, because that's the whole key. We got to unite, we got to stay together, and we got to keep passing that torch now.
Yes.
You know, it's most important.
And I love that you just said that, because, I mean, as we come a little closer to the end, I mean, I would love for you just to share with us what we can do as a younger generation to continue to share art and culture with the youth and those who are going to be growing into what's almost a world that's coming to a point where it's not being embraced as much. What can we do?
Well, you know, I always tell people, always do your homework. And today, we're living in what we call the information age. You have everything in the palm of your hand. And when something speaks to your spirit, if it moves you that much, why would you not want to do your homework on that?
Yes.
The worst thing that could happen to you is that you learn something that you didn't know before. And when you do, you know how we get excited. You want to go and tell someone else. And I call it the domino effect. The quickest way to reach a mass multitude of people is through one person. And that's the power that you behold. And, you know, any DJ, any musician, any artist, whatever it is you aspire that you want to do, you owe it to yourself, to your community, to your homework? How else are you going to hone in on your craft or your gift and arrive at accomplishing what you want to do or what you want to be? That is always going to be my advice to those who are out here, trying to shine their light and share their gift and creativity.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you. I'm like, I know you would have some wise words for us.
Yes, indeed. And remind me before we close. I'll share some resources here or references. So people, as we speak of doing your homework, people can go and look up some of the things that I am listening to or reading or documentaries that that I know about and have taken advantage of because like I said,
let's go ahead and share that right now.
So
I'm ready.
Okay, well, we'll just share some documentaries right now that I think are most important, especially since we don't have music education like we should available. So one that I want to recommend that I share with students here when I do my public speaking, that I think is probably one of the most important documentaries today as we speak of the music industry, what happened to radio, and where we are now as we speak of being a creative artist or independent artist, is a documentary called Before the Music Dies, which you can pull up, I'm sure, on YouTube or what have you. So that's one. The other one is none other than Bob Marley's latest documentary that I believe was once on Netflix. It still could be now. It's simply called Marley. Very important. And, I know big boys are not supposed to cry, but yeah, I'm going to be honest, Mr. Leonard, that one will get me every time. So check that one out. Also, Mr. DYNAMITE, the story of James Brown. Mick Jagger and James Brown had a special rapport and relationship with each other. And Mick did a wonderful job of helping to bring this documentary to light. So Mr. DYNAMITE, the story of James Brown, check that one out. Also, we lost another icon this past year, Mr. Bill Withers, and his documentary called Still Bill. That's another one you want to look up. Netflix may still be airing this one too. What Happened, Miss Simone? Story about Nina Simone, who probably is one of the most important revolutionary jazz vocalists, pianists, composers of our time. So yeah, What Happened, Miss Simone by Story of Nina Simone. On the jazz tip, one of my favorite jazz labels, and I think one of the most important jazz labels in our history here in America, Blue Note, the story of Blue Note and the story of modern jazz. So look up that documentary, which I'm sure is on YouTube or social media platforms, The Story of Modern Jazz, which is the Blue Note story.
I'm going to hold on real quick, just because in case it does. So it's only telling me that I have 15 seconds remaining. I guess because it only does an hour. But thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Leonard.
Yeah.